when I was a kid, around, I would say my life was very quiet. My family was, I grew up in a Catholic family. I was the oldest out of two other siblings. My family always was very caring. I never see my dad and mom that much. My dad always had to work, and my dad was on executive business, so I really didn't get to see him that much. So my life kind of grew up isolated, with not that many friends, and I was always kind of like the troublemaker at school, and there was always some issues that I had with classmates as I grew up, and everything was just going on a very low scale till like probably I hit sixth grade. When I hit sixth grade, I had to go to three different schools because I keep getting kicked out. I remember like one of the most crucial times at that time was whenever at this school that I was going to, all my classmates signed a letter saying like requesting for me to be kicked out of the school. They just like every single classmate, and they send a letter to the principal and call my dad over, and they tell him, it's like, hey, look, like it's not like we don't want him, but it's just that he creates so much problems that not even none of his classmates want him. And it was hard for me, hard for my dad, because he didn't know where to put me, where to send me. I did sixth grade in three different schools, so he's running out of ideas where to take me. So I ended up going to this art school for a while. I finished sixth grade, and seventh grade things start going the same way. Things start going south, and as soon as like you feel like you are completely out and completely with no hope. I remember so well my math teacher used to tell me, it's like in seventh grade, like he tells me, it's like, hey man, like the teachers, we kind of feel like most of us, we feel like it's better for you not to be here. Like you're always like, I feel like this is not the right place, and I'm thinking, man, like either the students, teachers, like what's up with that? And the teacher tells me, it's like, hey, look, like nobody really believes in you, but I feel like you can finish. Like I feel like you're not a lost case. I feel like you have potential. I feel like you're just distracted. Like why just don't make the last push? So I was very encouraged by him, and at this time, my mom, during this time of seventh grade, like my mom like lies to me about like going with her to go and grocery shopping, and she ends up having a meeting with a youth pastor at the church that she was going to. But at that time, that was the first time that I ever visited a Christian school, so a Christian church. So my whole concept of God was a little bit different. So by that time, I had long hair, listened to heavy metal. So the guy, first impression that he sees me is like, oh, I have to start from zero with this guy. Like, and he, for the first time, I see kind of God in a personal way, and that was, even though like when I received them and I prayed, even though I did that, and I felt pretty relieved. I didn't have any ways to grow my faith on, even though I used to go, but I had nowhere to share it. It just felt nice at that very first encounter that I had. And when seventh grade ended, like they tell my dad, it's like, okay, he cannot be in this school anymore. So my dad gives me an option of like, okay, where do you want to go? Like, it's like I have two options. You either go to a military school or a Christian school. And given those two options, like you don't want to go to a military school back home because like you're not gonna see your parents. They're very young. Like I didn't like that, so I compromised myself to go to a Christian school, even though I didn't really like the idea. So I go to an interview with the principal, and he asked me, "It's like, do you really want to be here?" And I said, "No, I really don't want to be here. I just don't have options." And so he takes me on a walk. He's like, "I appreciate your honesty. Like, can you be okay with it? Like, be okay with worship and praying? Like, as long as you don't go against it, like, will you be okay with it?" Since I have really no hope, no options, I said, fine, like, I'll do it. And I think it was the first time, like, on 8th grade where I start seeing, like, God, and I start praying, and I see a lot of changes in my life. And even though a lot of people at the beginning didn't want me at the school, at the Christian school, even though a lot of people didn't want me, like, I felt like there was something different. There was some love, there was some direction. There was some impact in my life that I never had, and it was important for me to always like be very receptive. Like how important it was to pray and follow, and things start changing to the point that on 9th grade I was invited to be part of this welcome committee for this president that he was visiting our school to see if we're gonna be approved or not for this exchange student program. And I wasn't really expecting anything. I was just sent to speak in front of everyone to just welcome them and answer some questions. And one of the questions was, what do you think the school is great? What do you think like we should approve the school? The only thing I said was like, well, like facilities are great, teachers are good, but what makes this place awesome is students like me. And I walk off and I left. That's the only thing I did. And when that moment happens, like the guy that is sitting, like he calls me over once the whole thing is over, and he's like, hey, what I just need to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. And this is not even the school is approved at the time. None of this is not even set in stone. And he comes and tells me, hey, I just want to tell you that God has a purpose for you. God has a plan for you. And I was in 9th grade at the time, and he's like, God needs you. He has to send you to the United States. It's like, you're going to have a scholarship at the end of the school, but like, whenever you're done here, you're going to go. So it was really funny that having somebody that on the school program, like, he was kicked out, like nobody really wanted me to have this moment where 9th grade was like put into a lot of people of like, oh wow, like he's actually getting a scholarship. And I wasn't really the brightest kid. I just had a lot of a drive for things for God and to preach to other people, and it was for me impossible not to share it. When I ended up going to college, I had a lot of doubts. I always confronted myself with doubts of the existence of God, and I had also deals with sex. Like I never really had like my relationship established. I never confronted that. I always felt like it was my issues and nobody should care. Like it was just like, those are my things, this is my fight. I never really opened up to people. But I felt like that was a seed from the devil put on my heart that at one point it just grew up. And at one point I could no longer fight it, and it overcame everything. Like I doubted the existence of God to the point that I really believed there was no God, and everything that happened to me was just a matter of coincidence, and like nothing really, it was all up to you, it was all about the man, it was all about that you can control everything. And during this period of time, I party a lot, I party as much as I can. My whole drive was to prove that I was good enough. Like God was just like something that people needed because they were weak. Like I came to that conclusion. So I fought it really hard. From 2009 to 2012, like God just starts breaking things off pretty bad. Like, I mean, like nothing works. Like it doesn't matter how I pretend that everything is okay. It doesn't matter with how many people I party or how many girls I go out or date or do whatever. Like that emptiness was always there, and I couldn't really confront it. So there was a time where a friend of mine comes to me and we debate about God for 3 hours. So he gives me this book. It's by Timothy Keller called The Reason for God. And then I never really looked at it until one time I remember being at home and just being completely devastated that the reality of what the world gave me, or that I thought it was good enough, it was never giving me the satisfaction that I was hoping for. And then when I finally challenged myself to say, okay, where have I ever been the most meaningful? Where have I ever given to the people the most? It's not by myself here, like pretending that I'm good for myself. So I came to my terms that maybe God exists, and I started praying at the beginning, and it was hard. My first prayers after all this period of time was like, I think I'm talking to myself. I feel like I'm talking to the walls. This is crazy. Like, how come there is only one God when there are so many religions? And at that moment is when Hebrews 11 from 1 to 4 and verse 6 talks about that in order to be saved, you need to believe that God sends his son, and you need to believe that he's the actual God, the only God and the only way, and that by faith is the only way that we can please God. Without faith it's impossible to please God. There is this step that we need to make, and the rational is necessary to believe and explore ourselves of how much God is magnified on the creation and everything that he has done. And to me, that was the big impact, that verse and the way that everything was created for him because he did it. And his ways were higher than mine, and there is just really nothing that I can minimize God. There is no existence. And after that happened, and I started praying and look for God more often, I joined First Baptist. I joined the class Roots, and I started dealing with my inner problems like I never had, my doubts, my open up to my weakness, to have go into a small group, open up to people, like share that love of Christ to not just to people that don't know Christ, but the people within, to strengthen them, to work together. It's not just my work by myself, it's just to work with other people. It's just to help the one that is next to you when they need you the most. And I felt like I never had that, and I felt that was where God was taking me. That moment where I'm like, you need to care about others, like walk with holding hands. Everybody's part of a body. Everybody's, if you're the nose, you're the nose. If you're part of the toe, you're part of the toe, but it's just part of the body. We cannot always envy, or we cannot always wish to be something different in the body. And just to admit that you are part of a specific part that God is, you are the most at. That's where you are more, your potential is, where God takes you, is that's where you need to be, and that's where God's gonna take you to other places and other people. And always listening to His will and put it on obedience, God will prosper. And I feel like that's the biggest thing that I can share to people. Just to be sensitive to His voice, to His will, and everything else just prosper. And I just want to thank God on the opportunity that I have to share my little part of my testimony with people who don't know, who is curious about how God can work on a very agnostic or atheist mind. Yeah, He can. Because if you dare yourself to believe that there is no God, prove it 100% that there is no God, and you might come to the conclusion there is in fact a God. Because if not, life itself would be very meaningless. If you believe that this is just luck, then there is no real value for you. There's no real existence. There's no need for morals. There is no need for love. There is no need to care about each other. And God can restore and show you there is more than that. And there is love and hope for everybody else.